Welcome back to this edition of What Am I Reading? And today I am reviewing Seize the Night, the second book in the Moonlight Bay series by Dean Koontz. I read this just recently, finished it. Give you the score real quick. It's got a 4.08 on Goodreads out of 5. Basically what this is about, Christopher Snow has a genetic disorder where he has to pretty much live in the night. He can't live in sunlight. He's like a vampire, but not. He just can't live in sunlight. Sunlight can kill him. So he lives at night, basically. Goes out at night, that's what he does. But what's going on in Moonlight Bay in this sequel, which I'll start with this. Fear Nothing, I had a hard time with. It was the very first Dean Koontz book I ever read. I just had a really hard time with it, and I did not like it. So instead of reading the sequel right after, I waited a year. And here we are. My thoughts on this, basically, storyline is kids are disappearing. Christopher Snow knows Lily, whose kid, Jimmy, has disappeared, and he's going to go track him down, find him, right? Him and his dog, Orson. Well, he gets close to the guy that's taking these kids, right? But then his dog runs off and is taken. So he has to depend on his buddy Bobby and his girlfriend Sasha to find Orson and Jimmy. And I'll be honest with you, it started off so slow for me. It really did. I was really having a hard time reading this. Again, I was like, because here's the thing. Dean Koontz, what I've noticed about him is he writes in metaphors, but also he's very detailed, like massively detailed. There was a certain scene in one of the early chapters where he was naming off every building where Christopher Snow was, where every single building, and it kind of takes me out of the story when you do that. But once we get past all that, and Bobby's helping him. Bobby's my favorite character in this book. Sasha's helping him. Lily has a breakdown when they can't find Jimmy. She thinks, Chris is trying to lift her up, but he really can't. She's just breaking down, thinking she lost her husband, now she's losing her son. And I mean, that's heartbreaking, it's a heartbreaking scene to watch or to read. But then it shifts gears, right? You're not getting this kidnapping mystery. You're end up getting this sci-fi story because they go into this building and they go into what this room is called the egg room, and they go into it. It's like a paradox. It's a present time, past, future. It's all this guy built this thing called the Mystery Train, and they go back in the past. And then it turns out, and you find out that this guy, I'm not going to mention his name, I don't want to spoil it, but he murdered his parents at age 12. And he's the one that built this Mystery Train. And it's weird at times. It's fascinating at times once you get to this element. Confusing at times because certain characters die, but they can be brought back due to this paradox. It was a wild ride towards the end. I had a really good time with it towards the end. But overall, I got to think, well, how do I feel about the whole book? And it takes a while to get into for me. And some people love Dean Koontz. I've always heard, I've always heard Dean Koontz is equal to Stephen King. I look at Stephen King as the best author I've ever read. No one's came close to him. So when I heard, I've always heard Dean Koontz, and I finally read Dean Koontz. And maybe I started off with a bad book. Maybe Fear Nothing's not one of his best. I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. But, I'm like, okay, maybe it's not, And so I read this book, Fear Nothing. I really didn't enjoy it. It's not that the storyline was bad, just he spoke in so many metaphors. It took me out of the story. And he kind of does the same thing here early on, but then it gets better. So I know I rambled a little bit about Dean Koontz here, but you know, I'm not, you know, don't want to offend anybody that's a massive Dean Koontz fan. I'm just saying my experience has not been the most pleasant.
Oh my God! Are you Stephen King? No, I'm Dean Koontz. Oh.
But I will go ahead and say this. What I liked about like, there's a certain scene with this a priest that's helping Chris, Sasha, and Bobby. Uh, he gets transformed in, I don't know, some beast, some monster, you know, that's transforming into him, and it's a big showdown, and you know, one of the characters has to kill him, and that person's never killed anybody before, and I loved the after effect that you had to take a life, you know, to save your friends, your boyfriend. I just spoiled it. Who did it now? Sasha was the one that did it, but I'm terrible at spoiling stuff. I apologize, but you know, I'm gonna get down to it. What I thought about this, it's, you know, once it gets to the sci-fi stuff, I'm kind of engaged in it a little bit more than I was. Um, but I mean, it was a lot of fun reading that stuff. Confusing at times, and I'm like, what am I doing? Where am I going? You know, where? But at the same time, I'm like, man, this is fascinating stuff. So I had a little fun towards the end. I will admit, I had fun with it. Uh, you know, it made me want to read another, because it set it up for a third book, and I read up on it, and Dean Koontz said his publisher didn't like this book. So a third book's never happened. There's always, he's teased a third one, but it's never happened. My opinion, what happened was he couldn't do a third book, so he created Odd Thomas. And I haven't got to read Odd Thomas, but I have seen the movie, and I really enjoyed the movie. You know, I feel like Odd Thomas and Chris Snow is a little bit similar, but Odd Thomas seems more entertaining, I would say, as a character. Christopher Snow to me is one of the blandest characters I've ever read, despite his genetic condition. He's just one of the most boring characters I've ever read. Your hero, you know, he's kind of bland to me. But I did love some stuff. The banter between Chris and Bobby is very entertaining. He is very energetic, very entertaining. When he comes into this story, life is lifted, and that's when I really started to get on board with it. When Bobby shows up, he lifts this story up, and he was very much needed. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Bobby. There's always something about a Bobby, you know. There's always something about a Bobby. I think when I think of Bobby, I think of Supernatural. I think of Bobby. Idget. Balls. You know, I think of that Bobby more so. I had an uncle named Bobby. He was fascinating too, honestly. But you know, when I get down to this story, and I love some scenes. I love the romantic stuff with Sasha and Chris. I love that. I like that too. When you meet the guy that's responsible for all this stuff, you don't get to see much of him. I wanted more of that character, and I didn't get it. But they were leading up to a third story, and I was like, oh yes, this is gonna be good. And I know there's not a third story, but I'm excited for a third book. So if he ever does write it, I'm gonna read it instantly, because I want to read it, because the way this book ended left me wanting more. So that's a plus in my book, because when I read Fear Nothing, I didn't want more. But basically, his mom was responsible for this paradox as well. She helped. You know, they did experiments with monkeys, dogs, cats. You got really sharp-minded cats in this story. There's one cat. I think his name's Mungo Jerry. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what his name was. Maybe I'm mispronouncing it. But he was very sharp. He was leading Chris into the paradox, you know, and he said not everyone's going to come out alive, which was very true. But then you get the present, past, and future, and you can kind of, you know, you can stop that. But one problem I did have, though, when they they presumably killed the villain. It was lackluster. But he presumably killed him, I say, because they did set it up for a third story. It was a little lackluster, but overall, man, I ended up liking the book, and I had a hard time with it at first. And I was, I told a few people I was having a hard time with this book, but ultimately at the end, I was like, I wanted more, And when a book does that for you, man, it's a good feeling. And I was like, I have so many Dean Koontz books, right? And I'm like, ugh, this is why you should read before you buy. But I have so many, so I'm like, I want to like his work because I basically have everything he's written. I actually just ordered the new book, Devoted. So yeah, but I mean, I love reading. I love giving these reviews. The last one was our most highest rated What Am I Reading book review, so that's a plus. Probably has something to do with the content, ape shit, but that is a plus. So I mean, Season Night was fun at times. It was hard to read at times. It was a difficult read. I'm not gonna lie. It was a difficult read at times, but it was also fun at times. It's a mixed bag, really. But at the end of the day, did I enjoy it enough? I did. So my score for this is 3 markouts, ladies and gentlemen. 3 markouts on the markout meter, 3 out of 5. I enjoyed it enough. I look forward to the next Dean Koontz book I read, which I do not know what that would be. Maybe I'll read one at the end of the year. I usually leave that for King, but maybe I'll go that way. But have you read Season Night? If you have, let me know what you think. If you haven't, don't let me know what you think. Oh, just get in there. Sorry. But I will leave you with this. I have fun at the end of reading this book. I look forward to what's next. I can tell you what's next. I'm reading Supernatural, The Road's Not Taken, which is a pick your own adventure type book. I really enjoyed it so far. That's what I'll be debuting next week on the podcast. What am I reading? I know I haven't done What Am I Gaming in a while. I'll get to that. I'm going to try to get to that soon. I'm playing a little bit more than I had been. But hopefully you've enjoyed this review. Give me a thumbs up if you have. Comment if you want me to read a book and review it for you. Also, this week I'm going to be doing, just give you a little heads up, what's coming up on the podcast this week. Since Aaron's starting his new job, he wants me to do Shudder and horror this week. So I'm going to be doing House of a Thousand Corpses by Rob Zombie. I'm going to watch that, review that, and get it out there for you. I wanted to do something I enjoy that I'm familiar with because I was looking through the catalog and there's a lot of movies I just don't know about on Shudder. But, anyway. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review and hopefully you come back for more. This has been Brandon Spivey from the Mark Out Movie Podcast. Mark it out with you awkwardly a little bit because that's what I do. But, hey, that's me. If you notice, I'm wearing a Seinfeld shirt. Yeah. It's the Summer of George! 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 Summer of George!